I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. Oh, I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years, and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all, we promised we'd be cordial.
Barry Toone, I'm so privileged to have you come on and do a show with me today. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So my listeners have heard you many, many times. We're doing the First Responder Mental Health Network together with Stepstone, the company that you're one of the founders of. But I wanted them to get to know more, about you. And I don't think that, many of them know that you're actually an attorney. So you've had a real fun time looking at some of my contracts going, yeah, you need to, what are you doing here?
Yeah, guilty as charged. Yeah, I was a practicing trial lawyer litigator for about 20 years. Had a belly full of that and was looking to do something different. I'm in recovery. And
mental health recovery, right?
I call myself a recovering lawyer, trial lawyer, and a recovering addict, because I am both. So I was looking for a way to sort of translate some of the skill sets that I had from my prior life into what we're doing now. So
and how many and how many attorneys are addicts or recovering addicts? I mean, come on now. Quite a bit.
I wish I had an exact number, but I can tell you that it's an astonishingly large percentage.
Not an easy, profession by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, it's challenging. There are some bars, state bars, that are doing really good jobs now of introducing wellness programs into some of their CLEs, or continuing legal education. So, but they need to, hoping that they can do a lot more, because it's something that a lot of lawyers struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't really know the answer to this, but how on earth did you go from what you were doing there to, working with Stepstone and having it be, first responder focused?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because it's a question that I get all the time, especially for people that I've worked with and known for a number of years. They say, come again,
Right.
How did you make this jump? But it's complicated, but it's not. I was semi-kidding about being an attorney in recovery. Semi-kidding, but I am in recovery, and really owe my life to a couple of great clinicians who just did some wonderful things for me. And when I got my life squared away and turned around, I remember having a conversation with my wife of 28 years, who stuck by me through a lot of this, and said, I've got to do something different. I said, I need to be able to give back and take what I've been so blessed with my recovery and do something about it. So that was the first step. The first responder and veterans piece was a little bit more complicated. Part of it was there just presented some business opportunities, but part of it was I was very close to my maternal grandfather, Jack Clark, and he was a decorated World War II vet and came home. And back then, you know how it was. There just wasn't a lot of help, not a lot of understanding. They certainly knew from World War I about shell shock, but I just don't think there was the opportunity to really help those veterans when they came home. So he experienced a lot. He was with the 104th Infantry, and they spent a lot of time in Belgium and France and experienced some of the most difficult parts of the war for the American soldiers, and came home and was just a different man. And was an alcoholic and died very early. Never talked about it, but you could see what he was going through. I remember as a young kid wondering who this Betty Ford was that he kept going to see. And
who is she? Right.
Well, I'm quite serious. As a young kid, I'd overheard some conversations from some of the adults, and some Papa's going to Betty Ford. Who in the world is that? But, I just adored him, absolutely adored him. I have his Bronze Star and some of his stuff from the war, and I just, it has always touched me. It's very near and dear to my heart. And when I look at our veterans and our first responders, and I see him, and so that was a big part of it. That's a long answer to your question, but
it's perfect though.
It was kind of complicated, but that's how I got there.
Well, I mean, that's the interesting thing though, is there's always a story. This is what I love about being in the mental health field. You know, there's nothing wrong or different about, being a widget maker, but, the story of how did you make this widget doesn't always have that personal touch that it does when it's something in the mental health field. So it's what I love about what I get to do is have those deeper conversations, and that helps people know who they're working with. If it's a potential business thing, okay, well, these people that you may be doing business with, here's a story that is very personal and resonant, and it shows how much they are invested in this particular thing. So it's not just about business.
Well, it's got to be exciting for you with the podcast you do and the people that you interview to hear those stories.
Oh my God. I live for it.
There is a story inside almost every one of these individuals that you're talking with, and there's a certain beauty to that. So I envy you for having that opportunity almost daily.
I will say this because listeners, I know Barry a little bit more than what we're alluding to we've worked together for a while and we've had more personal conversations, but I was thinking the other day, Barry, on my own journey with what it is that this network is and what we've created and what we keep creating. And I certainly have my moments, and I know you have had them too, when you've created something that does good for the world, but you still have to deal with the business side of it. And you're knee deep in all this work, and how can I handle this, and how am I going to, keep it, sustainable, and all those things that go on, which I totally know you've dealt with too, because we have had those phone calls where you're like, I don't have time to go to the bathroom, let alone eat a regular dinner, because this, what this takes to keep a business. There's the advocacy, and that's wonderful. And then there's, the business that runs it underneath, and you have to dip your toe or your entire body into both of those pools. But I'll tell you what, for me lately, I have really been looking at this network and going, girl, you do not give yourself enough credit. Look at what has been created here. Which was good for me, not in an ego, narcissistic kind of a thing, just more of, you are not honoring what it is that is happening here, which is pretty amazing. And I would say, people like you and I, we tend to not do that. We just like bury our heads and we just keep on slogging away as best as we can.
You're exactly right. You can't be half in on this. And,
Yeah.
it is exciting. People often hear me talk and they hear some of the great stories, and it is exciting. There is a genuine joy that comes with some of these success stories.
Oh, yeah.
When you hear back from police officers who have been able to save their families and save their lives, and
yes, their own lives.
That's exciting. And then you come home and get back to the office, and I remember the first few months when we were just hanging on and thinking, I got to keep the lights on too, and I've got people that count on me for their paychecks, and those, especially that first year. Goodness, it was
rough,
exhilarating and scary at the same time. There's a very fine line between motivation and desperation.
Right. Like, I am eating ramen and now I can't afford the ramen. What am I doing with my life? And yet there's all this like goodwill that's getting pumped out with what you do. It's really interesting. It's an interesting, a conundrum. And then you align yourself with another company. Sometimes that's the way it goes, and they have the same mission as you, but then you have to work all those sort of, okay, how do we share what we're doing and keep it with the same integrity? It's there. That's why I love the fact that you're a lawyer, because I know I can call you and be like, Barry, okay, what up? This organization is trying to like buy me or do this or that. And do I say yes, or do I like keep hanging on? Like, what the hell do I do? So
it's been nice to be able to kind of rely on other people's skill sets, because I know I've certainly relied on yours. And, I partnered up with just a terrific guy, Danny Warner, who's CEO of Chateau Recovery. And they are a residential treatment center that works with first responders. And really,
they totally care. It's amazing.
They're extraordinary. Really, in my view, the best in the country. And that was one of the reasons why we did what we did, strategically aligning with them. And you're right. You have to be very circumspect about the people that you team up with, because relationships and reputation is everything in this business. And it is exciting, though. I'm kind of taking a step back to your prior question, but I look back at even just where we were with starting this first responder network 6-8 months ago, and look at where it is now.
I know, it's amazing. We just added our first Kristin Warren. Which we're going to air her show pretty quickly next week, and she is the first female first responder. I just did her. She's a firefighter, and she, I don't know what the title is. Christy, you can kill me later for not knowing, but she ran a firehouse, and she, she's amazing, and she's our first female first responder. And it was so awesome to hear her show and hear how different it is, and not in the way that you would think, how women have to deal with how they handle the workplace as a female first responder. So it was really exciting for me too.
She's got some great. I'm so excited to have her part of the family. And you made an interesting point, and that is when I was thinking about her joining, I thought, here's what, in my mind, I think would be the challenges for a female first responder. And I made some assumptions, and then I listened to her.
Spill it.
Thought, you know what? I was incredibly wrong on a lot of things. And that's not a new thing
I was
for me.
too. I know. Same here.
I'm wrong often, but it's kind of cool to be able to listen and hear other people's experiences, and then have that opportunity to kind of recalibrate your view of the world. And it's a real great way of I think becoming more human.
Yeah, I love that. Recalibrate your view of the world. That's what a succinct sentence. Yeah, it's so true. That's the thing too, is I feel so lucky, blessed, just, all of those things that I get to have business relationships, which can be very lack of or devoid of emotion and all that, but mine aren't. Like, I know that the people that I am working with are I'm talking to their soul, because we all are in this for a reason. Nobody is here because it's just a paycheck. Not that there's anything wrong with those things. It's just that when you get into nobody goes into mental health to become a gazillionaire, first of all.
That's exactly right.
You do it because there's some resonance underneath it. And hey, money pouring in, that's a great thing, because how I look at it, and I know that you do too, is great. Let it pour in, because look at what awesome stuff we can do with it. That's more people to help.
Well, when you talk about everybody being in this business because they've got a reason, what's nice about that is that second, it's really the primary motivation. You're having a job and paying your bills, keeping the lights on is your secondary motivation.
Right.
When times are tough, that keeps you going.
Yeah.
But when times are good, that also helps direct the success that you're having.
Yes.
And so it's fun to watch how those motivations that people have for getting into this business,
Yeah.
how those motivations are directed and how they influence the way people behave.
Very true. Very true. I'm past being concerned about my ego taking over and me being all concerned about superficial stuff, because I have proven time and again that when the big chunk of money comes from doing consulting work, it all goes back into the philanthropy.
Well, you're being too modest. Actually, I know how much you plow back in to this work, and it's inspiring.
Soul's purpose, man. It's the
You know.
soul's purpose. I mean,
But
yeah.
you look at some of the people that we've had as guests on the
Yeah.
First Responder Network, some of these extraordinary people, Doug Monda and
Yep. I was just going to
Dick
say
Bauer,
Doug and his wife.
and
Yeah.
and Karen Monda is just
Oh.
she's just one of the greatest human beings I've ever had the privilege of getting to know. These people have the ability, when you hear their stories or just remind yourself of their stories, it has an amazing ability to recenter you.
Yes.
And sort of remind you on days when you're whining a little bit too much about things going wrong, that you really don't have that much to truly complain about.
Exactly. And I thought about this too in another, that way that, has this effect and effect and effect and effect. And I'll put it in this way. We just added a true crime genre to our network, which Jan Canty, who is a psychologist, was like, oh, I don't want to go with sensationalism, but I understand that true crime is what people want to listen to. And there's always that fine line that I'm walking with. I want to get as many listeners as possible, but I also don't want to be some sensationalistic person. But anyway, she interviews, she's doing a show called Domino Effect of Murder, and she interviews a lot of first responders, because her whole show, her husband, who was a psychologist, was murdered and dismembered, and it was just horrifying. But her show is about how that had an effect on some of the first responders that were part of the case, and family members. And it takes that other leap of beyond just the original people. Like, how is it affecting all these other periphery people's lives? And what's interesting to me about that in doing what we're doing is there's this microcosm, and then there's this bigger space that this all pushes itself out to. And if we don't take care and of those stories, we really lose something in the translation. And so when I have an interaction with someone who is a policeman or a fireman or an EMT or a nurse or a doctor or whatever, it allows me to be more present within myself and a reminder of, this is a human being. This is a person. They're going to have their own response to whatever this is that they showed up for, that is their job.
Hey, listeners, a quick but important notice for all the shows that we'll be doing for our first responders. In 2018, the number of police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and veterans, anyone who's considered a first responder, who died of suicide was greater than the combined total killed in the line of duty. More attention is being paid, but help is often elusive. Even with more available resources, those who are first in line to help us actually asking for help for themselves, that can be the hardest thing for them to do. Mental Health News Radio Network is working with Stepstone Connect to give voice to our incredible first responders. Stepstone Connect is an organization born of the belief that accessibility and confidentiality will eliminate traditional barriers to treatment. Privacy and the peace of mind that comes with it, combined with easy, everywhere access, underlines Stepstone's mission and treatment philosophy. It's simple. With access to the internet and a device with a camera, you're a click away from leading mental health clinicians who specialize in the treatment of PTSD and other trauma-related injuries for first responders and their families. If you or someone you care about is struggling, please don't let another day pass before discovering what Stepstone can do. Stronger connections, everywhere access, stepstoneconnect.com. You can find out more by going to their website, stepstoneconnect.com, or call 800-495-3761. Now back to the show.
Well, it's interesting. I used to be a pretty crabby person when I'd get pulled over, and
Right.
I was a motorcycle enthusiast, so getting pulled over was not an uncommon experience. Troopers they have a tough job.
Yes, they do. Oh
God. They're not on anybody's top 10 list. But being in the work, involved in the work we're doing now, and understanding the lens through which they have had to view the world, and the experiences that they go through, and the trauma that and it's not just, it can be and often is a dramatic experience that causes trauma. But for most of these men and women, it's just the cumulative effect of what they see every day. And it just seeps into their bones,
their marrow. Yeah.
And so when they pull you over or you have interaction with them and they seem like they're a little bit crabby, you know what? They probably are, and they probably have a good reason to. Mm-hmm. And what I found is if you take a step back, and I tried this recently because I did get pulled over recently, and it was extraordinary if you just change the way that you interact and let them know that I get it. And they're just like all the rest of us.
Yeah, they're human beings.
They need to feel okay, and they don't want to be disliked.
Right.
They don't. And they're packing a lot. That's a backpack that they carry around every day that is not fun to carry.
I'll tell you what, and I wasn't sure if I was going to share the story because I don't want anyone to think that I'm using this First Responder Mental Health Network to get out of tickets. But I was I had already been pulled over by a policeman where I live, saying, okay, in the state that you live in, you have to put your license plate on the front of your car. And I, of course, didn't do it, and he didn't write me a ticket, and blah, blah. So I got pulled over again for the same thing by a different policeman. And I was like, oh God, now I'm really going to get it because I didn't put, and no excuse. It was like 2 weeks later, no excuse whatsoever. I should have just done it. But, we were kind of talking, and I wasn't trying to engage him in conversation. We were just talking, and he just kept engaging me in conversation. And I was like, and this is after we started the First Responder Mental Health Network. And I was like, I guess he's just talky, I don't know what this is. And then he said, God, you just sound so familiar. And I'm not the kind of person that goes, oh, they must have heard me on my show. Like, that's the last thing I would ever think of. Right. But I said, well, do you listen to podcasts? And he goes, oh God, yeah, all the time in my vehicle. I said, well, have you heard of the First Responder? He goes, oh, now I know who you are.
Mm.
And I said, okay, I'm not trying to get out of a ticket. Like, I'm telling you right now, you have to give me a fix-it ticket. Like, you can't not give me one, and he wouldn't do it, of course. But now let me tell you, my license plate is on the front of my car, and it was already on the back, but it was just so funny to have him go, oh my God, it's so weird to like put a face to a name. And I listened to you in my car, and I've been listening to your shows, and I've been listening. And he started naming off, Mike Cook and you and, these different people that have been on the show since we started this network. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in this little town that I live in.
Mm. Well, that's exciting. I remember the first time I listened to Mike Cook, and I thought to myself, every first responder needs to hear this story.
Oh yeah, he's amazing. All of them.
They really are.
They're just, it's amazing. So, okay. So tell, because, we have to have a plug in here, and don't turn away, listeners, because this is important stuff. And I preface that with, it is so very hard for the people that are first on the scene for anything, including mental health issues, to get help for themselves. It goes against the whole I'm a caretaker code to care about caretaking yourself. So this is so very important. Stepstone is, a company that you are a founder of, and the way that you offer services to me is in this way of making it so much easier for those of us who really don't want to acknowledge that we need care because we're too busy caring for everybody else. So how did Stepstone, come to be? And, really just how did it come to be? Why did you want to, jump on this kind of a premise?
That's a great question. Stepstone was really born of this idea that there were certain barriers to treatment, especially for first responders and veterans, that were recognized by really anybody who was paying attention, but that we really didn't think was getting addressed. And that if we were going to be successful in helping treating this population, we needed to overcome those barriers. And one of the big ones you've already touched on, and that is there is a certain type of person who is attracted to the first responder profession. They're just different than we are. That job, we often are funny, especially in the United States, where we ask, what do you do? It's often the first question we ask.
Yes.
Not who are you?
Right.
What do you believe in? But what do you do? But that idea of your job defining you is multiplied by 1,000 for a first responder, because what they do is who they are.
Yes.
And their job is to look out for everybody else. And so there is an inherent strength that has to, first of all, exist, but also has to be shown. you have to, that strength has to radiate. They have to have that armor so that they can do their job.
Right.
And that makes it extraordinarily difficult for them when they're struggling internally to just be willing to acknowledge on the outside to someone else that they need help, but even to themselves. It's just, those men and women who are providing the help and protecting everyone else are the ones that it's the hardest for them to ask for help. So that was barrier number one. Barrier number two was the confidentiality aspect. That's another thing that's really challenging because of that culture. Being able to get treatment in a convenient, confidential way,
right,
is huge. We knew that by providing this telehealth platform where people can connect with their therapists online over an encrypted HIPAA-compliant platform, that was a great idea. We knew that was going to be successful. We didn't appreciate just how exciting this concept was going to be to first responders. I think when we first started, we thought, you know what, this is going to be something that people are going to want to be at their home office, at their desktop. And certainly there are people that is the case.
Right.
But we hear so many stories of police officers who, at the end of their shift, will just pull their car over and either with a tablet or their smartphone,
pull up that podcast
or connect with their therapist.
Yes.
Literally just get on the platform and connect with their therapist right there. And that's the time to do it, to be able to provide a service to these men and women that is immediate, when the need is the greatest.
Right.
When they're in crisis, it's really not, the answer is not to set an appointment 3 weeks out.
Oh my God, no. It's like, I need help right now because tonight or tomorrow I have to go rescue people.
And drive 45 minutes and go to a brick and mortar facility where I might have to wait in the lobby, sitting next to the person that I busted last week.
Yes, exactly.
And so that has been a tremendous blessing for these folks. And that is very rewarding to hear those stories. And so that's really how we started and why we got into the business that we did, and why it's becoming really the most important part of Stepstone.
Absolutely. Well, so our listeners can share to all the first, responders that they know, family, and so on, and also, those that are listening that are first responders that want help. Where would they go to find Stepstone?
Just have them go online to www.stepstoneconnect.com.
Super simple.
It is simple, and really everything is right there at their fingertips after that, and they don't need to wait to get help. They don't need to wait to get better. It's quick, and that's what's exciting about it.
Absolutely. And I just want to tell you listeners, Stepstone has been so supportive of this network, even, in the beginning of creating the first responder piece of it, not knowing whether it was going to be successful. It takes a lot for a company to, put their time, their energy, and their funding into supporting initiatives that we don't have a litmus test on whether or not it's going to take off. And thankfully it is. But I just want to say thank you to you, Barry, and for everyone else at Stepstone for being so supportive, jumping into the fray of unknown with us.
It's been one of the best business decisions and personal decision that I've made, and business decision that Stepstone's made. So we've certainly appreciated the relationship.
Awesome. Well, listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mental Health News Radio.
Sometimes I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it, but I'm opposing.
Good boy.